Okay. Thank you for coming. I mean, it's packed session, so we love you for being here, and thank you. So hopefully we can do something that is a little bit unusual. Some of the panelists, I'm a little bit boring. Okay, so we're gonna push the boundaries a little bit and ask some questions, and of course, we can decide if we're gonna answer them or not. But I think we want to have, and the key here is that hopefully we disagree on a lot of things, and so I think we'll make it much more interesting. So quick round of introductions. So we have Gabriele Ricci, he's the Chief Data Officer and Chief Technology Officer for Takeda. Then we have Brad Lightcap, who's the CEO of OpenAI, Keith Strier, who's the VP for AI worldwide for NVIDIA. And then James, who's the Stanford, you're the co-founder, right, the human-centered AI at the university. Excellent. So why don't we do that? Let's do we're not going to spend a lot of time introducing ourselves and what our companies are doing, because I think they're kind of pretty straightforward, right? If you're in an AI session and you don't know what OpenAI and NVIDIA do, you're in the wrong session. Anyway, so
let's introduce Takeda.
No, Takeda. Takeda is a big brand, right? Anyway, so why don't we do that? So we're going to go from from Gabriele to the rest of the team here on stage. Maybe a quick intro, and talk about. If you go around here, it's all about AI, right? So we see a lot of things. Some things, they're kind of forced to be AI versus being truly AI, but regardless, we cannot ignore, right, what's around us. So we'd love to get your perspective. What's on your mind? What did you learn being here for a couple of days now?
Well, I see that the word AI is always linked to trust. Many different signals here, and it's true for us. Maybe because we work in a very regulated environment, and for different reasons, the healthcare industry is trying to reinvent itself. Because of the geopolitical tensions, because of the microeconomic tensions, because the pressure on cost control across basically all microeconomics. We all, myself, my company, our peers are trying to reinvent ourselves. So AI in general is big, is real, but it comes with risks and limitations. And so happy to share some of these risks and some of these limitations that we're experiencing.
Very good, that's perfect. So Brad, you guys, I think between you and NVIDIA truly actually generated this, okay? If there are two companies that are at the forefront and really made this revolution possible, your two companies. So what's coming, right? We're curious to see, what you guys are going to come up with, and in general, right? What's your sense?
Yeah, well, it's it's interesting. We're so early in all of this, and I try and keep the historical perspective in mind. I think we're probably in something like the equivalent of like 1990 to what the internet was, and I suspect that if you look back 10 years from now on what impact AI would have had, whether it's in business or anywhere else in anyone's life, the tools that we're using in 10 years and the things that we consider impactful are actually not the tools that we use today. And these are basically kind of like toys or protoforms of the types of things that we're going to develop over time. And so it's a little interesting because I run our business and all of our go-to-market activity and work a lot with our partners and customers. And I have to kind of try and help them keep pace with the rate of change, while also helping them understand what is the thing that they are able to deploy today, how do they use it, what limitations does it have, and so that makes for an interesting conversation as to how to balance the future with the present.
Very good. And then before we go to Keith, actually I have a story about Keith, because Keith, we know each other for a long time, and then at some point many years ago, right, like Keith comes to UI as an alumni, and he says, I'm going to work with this company, and I'm going to do AI. And to be fair, like, I didn't see it coming that big, but then lots of people at UI said, really? Okay, what is he doing in working for a gaming company? Anyway, we're really very jealous of what happened to Keith. So no, thank you. Congratulations for seeing it coming, I guess.
Thank you, Nicola. When I left EY, a great firm, and I was very proud to be a partner there. When I left EY and went to NVIDIA in 2019, most of my partners thought I was crazy. They're like, "You're going where? You're going to a chip company? Don't they work games? Teenage, absolutely thought I had lost my marbles. But I'll tell you, an interesting connection between this place, Davos, and that decision was when I was a partner back in 2016, I think it was, right? When the World Economic Forum published that seminal white paper on the fourth industrial revolution, right? And that wasn't just about AI, but it was when it really kind of put that out there, that framework. within that framework was really talking about the emergence of multiple technologies, but AI was definitely the one that caught on. And I think in 2016 and 2017 in Davos, I had not been, this is my first time, but watching it on TV, reading about it, AI was very prominent. It really sort of bubbled up as a very important topic. And the CEOs of the world and the world leaders, it wasn't on the radar, and then it was on the radar, and I could see a sea change sort of around that topic. And that's when it really sort of hit me that this is going to take over the world. Now, the reason I went to NVIDIA and the reason why I'm proud to be at NVIDIA now is because NVIDIA for the last 35 years, has been building this computing engine, this end-to-end full stack platform based on the GPU technology that has fundamentally enabled things that not every animated movie, special effects, games, all these things, but the same architecture turns out, it was fundamental to the workloads needed to progress AI. And that wasn't immediately obvious when they founded the company 30 years ago, back in the 90s, but it emerged. And along with OpenAI and other incredible entrepreneurs and pioneers and developers, it wasn't one company, right? It was this sort of convergence probably about 10 years ago, actually. So I think when it really all kind of kicked off. But my epiphany in 2018, 2019 was that, AI looks great, but without the underlying infrastructure to make it work, without that engine, this is, it's not going to happen. So I did jump over to NVIDIA, and I feel grateful for that. But it really is an ecosystem of partners, including consulting firms and universities, and it's a really rich story of collaboration. And so it's fun to be here. So I'm proud to be here. Again, the Davos sort of conclusion around AI, 7, 8 years ago, is one of the reasons I'm here. So it's pretty cool.
So James, you're coming from a little bit of a different angle, right? Representing like a very prestigious academic institution. Do you want, before you answer my question that is coming, do you want to explain a little bit what the Human-Centered AI Institute actually does?
Yeah, so just to give a little context, many of us have been working on AI for 30 years or more, and really what you're seeing today is the product of really the deep learning revolution that really started to kick off in 2012 to 14, where deep learning started to kick butt on all of these different algorithm benchmarks. And so many of us working in the field started to see this getting into real products, even if the end users didn't know what was going on. Many of you noticed suddenly your speech recognition started to work on your phone in 2017, 2018. That's when they replaced the previous algorithms with deep learning. So many of us started to see this is really happening now. We've all been working on this forever, but now this is going to be throughout society in every way. And we need to make sure that there is trusted sources to help guide this. It can't be purely from private industry. We need to make sure that industry is still a player in this, but also academia, government, and others to have a say in how this technology is going to be developed, because it's going to have such a profound impact. So in almost 2018, we started to launch this institute. And we could have just said, hey, the Stanford Institute for AI, following on the Stanford AI Lab that was founded by John McCarthy, who is the one who coined the term AI back in the 1950s. So Stanford's been a big player in this. But it was really important for us to think about how to do AI differently than just the technology. So we were very purposeful in calling it human-centered AI. And for us, that means more than just saying AI should be used for applications that have a human impact, like education and health, but it's also about how you develop that AI to have a positive human impact with less risk of some of the downsides. And for that, we believe you need to design AI not just for the user at the user level, user-centered design, which we've been trying to get industry to do for 30 years, which they finally do, but also you need to think about the broader community that AI system is going to impact and design for that. And then if your system becomes ubiquitous, you better be thinking about what are the societal level effects. And you need to do these kind of analysis in a design process at the beginning, not after a product comes out to say, hey, is it safe or is it going to work? You need to have interdisciplinary teams that have not just technologists, designers, but also social scientists and domain experts from the start.
So when we were...
Nicola, let me just interrupt you for 1 second. This is my second panel, And for the second time, I will need to generously ask the folks in the last row to open the window so that everyone doesn't melt. And I apologize for the breeze that will be hitting the back of your neck.
Yeah, no.
For the rest of our benefit.
Sandwich of heat, right? Because we have these and the lights. So it's like, you know, feel like in the Bahamas.
Well, even I see the people in the front row starting to sweat. So it's
no, very, very smart move. I didn't have the courage to do it. But anyway, thank you. So going back to James, right? So one of the things that, you know, I think this is what I say, but tell me if it's true. And then before, when we were prepping, right, you said you can ask me any question, so I'm going to do that.
I didn't say the answer would be good.
No, it's okay. Try it. So the point is this, right? This is probably the first major technology revolution that actually does not originate. I mean, you can argue that originated years ago in academia, but you know, the application of these type of technologies really came from the private sector, right? And so this is something that
I would disagree with that.
Okay, no, good. We said that we wanted to disagree. No, but anyway, but this is not my question. My question is that this is, in my mind, like the same that when they ask me, what's the impact of this technology on UI, right? And my answer, really honestly, is that it can be really good or really bad. We don't know, right? It's a fantastic opportunity, but also a big challenge to a company that makes knowledge the center of what we do with clients, right? And so for you guys in the same boat, right? How do you see the evolution of academia when the technology evolves so quickly and some of the knowledge, so in terms of how do you select and say, what are the skills of the next generation of leaders that need to be there? And also what the current leaders that are here in this room need to do to get there too, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a big revolution, especially, as you say, for information work. So it's going to affect every job, whether it's, you know, running a business or, you know, running a research group and teaching a class in a university. Every job is going to adapt some way to this technology. For some of us, that's a positive, right? Because a lot of places don't adapt very well or don't want to adapt. You know, they say you don't really change a research paradigm in academia until the people die, and then you get new professors and you start to the next thing. This is going to force change everywhere. It will force change in academia, but it's going to force change in, you know, kindergarten, K through 12 schools, which don't like to adapt either. So a lot of that change, some will be really difficult for people. So the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of kind of disruption that causes a lot of pain, but it's also going to lead to the chance for positive changes that have been hard to get into systems, whether in the university or elsewhere. Different universities, it will impact more or less. Some are already very fluid between industry and academia, fluid between research areas. I've been on the faculty at 5 top places, and I would say Stanford for me is the most fluid in this way and interdisciplinary. So for us, I feel it'll have less impact in that way, but there's still things that we're going to have to change to deal with it. In terms of training, well, people need to learn about the technology. They don't need to become experts in it, but they have to understand, you know, what's possible with it, what's coming down the pike, what are the trade-offs, what are the risks. So for us, we're seeing a big surge in partnerships with corporations for our institute, as well as executive training. And it goes beyond just private industry. So we've had congressional staffers 2 summers come to Stanford for 2 days of boot camp on AI, because these are the people who are writing the laws and they don't actually understand technology. So it's important that we're getting more education, whether at that level or at the corporate level, or even, you know, we're working on curriculum for young kids to understand. This is technology that's going to affect everyone's life, so everyone has to understand it.
So I have 3 kids in college age. I mean, they're only going to school in California, and when they didn't understand why I told them not to study computer science, to study philosophy. But I think I'm kind of having my now the payback. But anyway, I started that. So
can I ask you, because this kind of change and impact is actually happening in all organizations. My organization is the same. We're trying really to imagine how our organization, in terms of skills and capabilities, will look like in 2-3 years from now. And we made it very scientifically. We go through the entire organization, all roles, at task level, and believe me or not, 5-10% organization will be impacted in the short term. Some roles will be augmented, some roles actually will be displaced. So how you help the organization to change, how you educate the organization to use, you know, new systems, but also how you build a framework, right, to operate in a safety way. And again, the impact will be huge. Some roles, medical writers or sales reps or even operators, will change the way in which they work dramatically. And this is also a combination of not just AI or Gen AI, but the intersection of other technologies, robotics or sensors that anyhow leapfrog at the same time. So that created an incredible convergence that for us help us really to reimagine how we work with our customers, the experience that we are creating. And for customers, I mean patients, I mean HCPs, donors, and also employees. I think we have the responsibility to really help us into be ready, right? But we need to do that very cautiously.
Yeah. So a lot of clients asking me, what in terms of use cases, right? Where do you get started? What are the use cases? I really don't like that question because to me, whenever there is a human, there is a use case for generative AI, right? In terms of, but you are running like a complex organization in a very sensitive, regulated, industry. So what would be an advice? I say, what do we start with?
Well, I mean, in life sciences across the entire value chain, from drug discovery through drug delivery. Think about how clinical trials are run, the role of medical writers, how you summarize, all information you collect during trials, how you select a site for the trial, how you engage with a patient, how you recruit a patient. But then moving into, the manufacturing, robotics, for example, supply chain, how you optimize your network, and all the supportive functions. Now, something very interesting that we discovered with all these pilots that comes with, again, risks and some technology limitations that we are addressing, is that we thought that immediate impact would have been in the operations. And then moving into people that were behind the desk, right? And then roles like scientists that are more creative. Actually is happening the opposite. And that's amazing because those areas are less regulated if you want. And it comes with, if you have 80% of data precise, is it okay to use this data to redesign the customer experience? Maybe. Is it okay to use 80% of accuracy to drive your budget, so financial processes? Maybe not. I will never let an AI system build my budget with 80% of accuracy. I will kill myself. The same you can imagine when you talk about early diagnosis or patient outcomes. Is impossible. So how actually you helped the organization decide where the human is in the loop still and where you can delegate, the most creative part? Because I think the most powerful thing that we discover is that starting with a blank canvas is very complicated. If you have an int, you can build up. This is actually human behavior. And all roles actually that needs this hint are actually generating more productivity, effectiveness, speed across the entire organization.
Brad, a question for you. So you hear people defining generative AI like in any possible way they can imagine, right? But the majority of the people, I think they effectively think about it as a really powerful search engine and summarization engine and an amazing NLP. Right, natural language processing. I mean, with my huge accent, right? I use ChatGPT. The app still understands me, so which is amazing. And so it was always the IVRs, right? So please repeat, right? And now I don't need to do that anymore. But the same thing, yeah. So, but one thing that I think people are kind of a little bit overlooking is I think Sam Altman also said something about it yesterday. Is AGI. Right, and you can. That's another one that you can define in a million different ways. But if you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you define, and I like the way I think you guys define it, which is you see a different problem and the machine can solve it without being trained on it, right? That kind of in summary. Do you think we're there, or we will be there very soon?
I don't think we're there. I think it's an open guess as to how quickly we'll get there. I think it could be fairly soon. I think it could be many years off. I think there's still fundamentally a few discoveries we have to make to get to that point. I want to get to something you said earlier, though, that I think kind of underscores for us the challenge and to what I said earlier, a little bit of kind of how we think about the present versus the future and the evolution of these systems, which is this concept of kind of what are they useful for? And in a way, the systems that we use today are kind of not actually what we think AI systems are useful for, really powerful AI systems. I was at a dinner last night, and there was a conversation about factualness and what people call the hallucination rate on some of these systems and how they produce an answer that may or may not be correct, just drawing on their own world knowledge. And everyone was kind of like, well, I can't use an AI and an LLM for that because I'll never know with 100% confidence that the answer I get is 100% accurate. And I was like, if you want to use these things as databases, they're the world's most expensive database. And I'm not sure, we have better technology for that. And if you want recall, there's way better ways to access information than using an LLM. And so the way that we think about them really is not as these big glorified databases where you try and cram as much knowledge and information as you can into the pre-training. It's really to give them a concept of the world and then let them go off and take that world knowledge and be able to see new data, see new things, and reason fundamentally about how to solve a problem. And that's the next paradigm I think that we care about and what will be the kind of next stepping stone toward what we call AGI is how do you actually get these machines to think critically, to think in a multi-step way, and to solve really complex tasks. And so there's a bunch of questions that raises, and the work that Stanford and others do around safety and understanding the limits of these systems is really important as we enter that world. But to your question, that would be for us kind of the mile marker of progress is can you really fundamentally build systems that are great reasoning engines?
Yeah. Can I add to that? So I'm not an engineer or a scientist, so I don't come at it from that angle. I think.
What are you doing here then?
Shh. I think of it functionally. That's kind of where I come from. Just from a non-engineering perspective, functionally, how does it work? Does it seem to be reliable? Obviously, that's important when you think of functionality. But how do we perceive it? And I think that what was so amazing of what happened in November of 2023, when ChatGPT was launched. Sorry, 22, because it's 24 now, 23 last year. I can't even keep track. So in November of 2022, when that came out, 2 weeks later, I was in the Canary Islands with all Europe's digital ministers for the OECD Digital Ministerial, and it's amazing because it was only a few weeks, and already that's all they wanted to talk about. Literally, it was in the opening keynote. It was in every single conference. It was in every single workshop. And of course, very few people in that meeting had an engineering background or understood what the technology was about, could even tell you what an LLM was about. But functionally, the experience was so powerful and so compelling that people had already kind of come to the conclusion that AI has arrived. So there was this real. So I think of the world as sort of pre-ChatGPT and post-ChatGPT, right? It really is this red line, and I saw it so quickly, so clearly, and over the last year. I mean, that's essentially what's happened. So I think there's a lot of engineering and data science conversations you can have about when and whether AGI will occur and what that will look like, right? But I think functionally speaking, the average person, whether it's a policymaker or just or a high school student, they kind of feel like there is this digital capability to simulate human-like cognitive function, and that's arrived. Right? It feels very much like that's arrived. It may not be 100% reliable, and it may do some funky things. And some lawyers in New York have learned a hard lesson submitting, briefs based on that. But functionally, I do feel like we're on this spectrum, right? And AGI maybe is at the end of the spectrum, but we're on that spectrum and we're progressing along it. That's how it feels.
I was just going to say we've been on that spectrum for a while.
Yes.
And in fact, these breakthroughs had already occurred. What was really important here was an interface that made it accessible to the general public. Right. Any of these guys working in AI were already seeing amazing things that OpenAI and others were publishing and doing, but now everybody could play with it. You were already using applications using this technology, but you didn't have the chance to directly get in there and do things, and that was the big thing. And I think from an enterprise perspective, if your enterprise is not allowing your employees to use these things now, that's a mistake, because your employees are going to be the ones who come up with the great applications that are going to impact your enterprise in 2 or 3 years. And so you need to make sure you've dealt with all of your legal issues and what kind of data can go where. But my key recommendation for enterprises is make sure your employees can use it in their work to at least experiment, because that's where the great ideas that we haven't even thought up yet are going to come from, not necessarily from some startup. A lot are going to come right from your own people.
And agree, James. I mean, for example, in Takeda, to start exploring how you can give an assistant basically to all employees, we started using and play with some technologies, right? We created what we call My Aibo. In Japanese, Aibo means companion. And we didn't promote it. but actually it taps into our knowledge base, 242 years of history, right? And it's used now, right now, by 14,000 people every single day without being promoted, just because people are curious. And they are finding their own way, actually, to prompt in their own roles and get the best answer possible. We organized a Gen AI Day, and 7,000 people across Takeda joined, colleagues. That was the biggest conference ever organized in Takeda. So there's a lot of interest and curiosity. Comes from the fact that it's a consumer grade, if you want, technology and ready for the prime, right? And so how you bring this into an environment that is regulated, you don't want to share confidential data and so on, but it's definitely there and the interest is big.
So we are in January, right? So and now you can see on LinkedIn and everywhere, pretty much everyone saying, oh, these are my 5 predictions for the year, 3 predictions, okay, whatever. Everybody is entitled to predictions, okay, great. But I don't have any prediction because actually I don't know. But if you look at, there is one thing though that really worries me, and I want to, point back to what Brad said, which I think, and I want to, maybe you guys one quick comment on what I'm about to say, which is, I think we're putting this technology under it's a double standard, right? So we hire 150,000 people every year at UI, right? And a lot of them are actually 23, 24 years old, right? We will never put one of those kids in front of a board, right? And talk about whatever. And so why they get a pass and the technology doesn't? And it's much better to say, okay, still have the technology. I'm not going to trust it 100%, but it can help me. So my fear a little bit of this whole movement is that we're going to end up like in this kind of I don't even know how to call it, but like, in these loopholes where, if we're missing completely the boat on this, so the reasoning ability, the access of information, the speed of execution, the interface and everything. Because why? Because we want perfection. And my company, we have 100,000 auditors, okay? So there's an interesting bunch of people. And the auditors, one of the first time I was talking about these things, is this certified? I said, what? What does it mean, right? You don't certify something in knowledge. So just give me like your view and say, how do we get out of it? Because even this morning I was in a breakfast meeting and everybody was talking about so for me, responsible AI is I have an allergic reaction to it because I don't think how you can do it. Or, this is predicted, it's a probabilistic tool, right? Every word gets predicted almost at real time. So how do you do that? How do you do traceability, evidence? I don't know, right? So maybe I'm not that deep. But give me a sense of, to me, this is the big worry, is that we are going to miss, what would you say, the tree for the forest, right? And then we're going to end up not actually taking advantage of it. So
I have a little bit different perspective. I think it depends about the customer and how you design AI systems based on the customer experience. Because if the customer is patient, well, you need to gain the trust. And so how you handle the data privacy concerns, the data protection, the fairness of the outcomes of a prediction or a decision of an AI system is super important because you can impact the life of a person. And the outcome should be fair to avoid bias. And so it depends also on the data that you're using to train those systems. If the customer is an employee or, a completely different story. So I think you can accept risks, but you need to have a very solid framework in the organization, an ethical AI framework that is actually helping making these decisions. It's trade-off. But when it's trust and reputation, as a company, we can give up. Mm-hmm. This is the reason why it exists. And so ethical AI makes sense when you actually are dealing with very vulnerable populations, like patients in our case.
And I don't disagree, but maybe going to you guys, but the how is what I don't understand. So yes, in principle, we all agree. Nobody say, oh, I want something completely irresponsible. But how actually you do, is the technology really capable of doing something like that? And are we actually focusing on the wrong thing, right? So maybe, Brad, I know you're close to the technology but more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think my guess is the world will just change. I think that people will realize that people who know how to use these technologies are just inherently advantaged relative to people who don't. There was a great Paul Graham tweet from a few days ago, something to the effect of, it used to be that like a 28-year-old programmer was just way better than a 22-year-old programmer, almost unanimously, just because they had more experience. But now it seems like 22-year-old programmers are actually as good as 28-year-old programmers because they know how to use AI. And I think that's just going to be true in most roles. And so I suspect that, basically kind of the next wave of people that enter the labor force who fundamentally have grown up knowing how to prompt these tools, knowing how to use them, knowing how to get these tools to go extract information from other sources of data, will fundamentally just be advantaged relative to anyone else. And so, I suspect companies just won't have a choice. Why would you want to impair the productivity of a new hire? You're fundamentally just putting them at a disadvantage. And so I think that may take a couple of years. And if you look back at historical precedents, I think there was always some level of this at basically kind of every new technological wave where, someone that was using the internet back in the 90s to do something and then wanted to kind of bring that in some way as a kind of prosthetic to their work to help them do something was probably told, like, there's just no way that you can do this and use this, and it's gonna ruin our corporate communications and all this. And now it's like we couldn't run a company without the internet. So I suspect that the same thing will happen here.
Yeah, and everything that you said for companies is true for countries, right? Yeah. So from 2017, when Canada released the first national AI strategy up until 2022, countries were very focused on having a national AI strategy, lots of conversation at the head of state level, no question, a national priority in many cases. But when it came to sort of really investing at scale, whether it's the infrastructure or other kinds of aspects, still I would say that the investment level was modest. Post ChatGPT, there's an absolute global race to build up the infrastructure, to boost the university AI programs, to support the local, to turbocharge the local AI startup ecosystems, all that stuff, and it's incredible. It's incredible, and the basis for competition, whether it's a company or it's a country, has changed. And I have conversations with ministers and other leaders about their legacy and about the future of their economy, and do they want to look back, and the footnote being that they failed to invest and to do the right things for because these things take time. It isn't a matter about one PO or one university program. I mean, this is generational, but you have to get going, and you have seen over the past year a lot of announcements, a step up in the level of commitments by countries to bring that infrastructure, bring those programs, make these investments, but it's not even across the world, and you do see, across all the world's capitals, you see definitely pockets of intensity, and so I think that the future is uncertain, but one thing that feels certain is that that there will be a new set of winners or losers, that the mathematics of global competition will change, and those that are and that's not to say don't invest in responsible AI, and that is sort of a given, that's table stakes, but those that don't do it and don't learn how to do it. And I think you didn't say it, but the AI literacy is so foundational to all of this. Those that are taking that seriously, I think it'll play out. And I think you will see both companies. I mean, I think OpenAI is a great example, and you will see countries who will move up the indexes and the lists in ways that it didn't anticipate. I mean, NVIDIA. NVIDIA is one. If you look at NVIDIA in terms of size, we have less than 30,000 employees. That's very small, right? I mean, EY is 300,000 employees, 400,000 employees, right? So we're less than 10% your size, but worth 1.4 trillion, right? So you look at the value that we've created.
We're still very jealous.
Yeah. So the value that's created per employee, why is that, right? But I think that's a signal for other countries and companies and I think OpenAI is no different. I mean, the employee to value ratio is ginormous, but I don't think that's the exception. I think that'll be the new normal, and I think small countries and companies and others and the big companies and the big countries have to heed that lesson, that the mathematics are changing.
So I know you're a little worried about regulation, or whether a lot of this talk about safety is a mistake. I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to stop this juggernaut. You just heard these valuations of the companies. There's so much money rolling around here. That incentive is enough for people to do stuff. But there are real risks. Displacement, job displacement is a real thing. There are going to be people who are going to lose their jobs. So people who are in government need to be thinking about, what do we do about that? Because we don't want to repeat of the previous round of globalization, which was really automation, which led to overall better off economy, but some people lost out really badly. And so how that's spread out, that inequality is going to really matter. So one thing we can think about what Brad said, who's going to be using this and how they're better because they use it, is what one of my colleagues at Stanford, Kurt Langloth, said. He said, will AI replace radiologists? Is the wrong question. The right answer is radiologists who use AI will replace radiologists who don't. You can take that same sentence and apply it to almost every job. And so it's also about how we think about designing AI systems. We need to think about them as not replacement, not automation, but think of how do we augment people in the original conception of Douglas Engelbart in the 1960s, who invented essentially all the user interface that you use today is augmenting human intellect. And AI is now the tool to augment human intellect, but we have to design consciously for it. If you leave it just to the AI scientists, they've been trained on, I take data on what a task somebody does, and then I train a model to do the same thing. That doesn't understand the complexity of what humans really do, all the different things that they do, and the things we're good at in terms of understanding emotion, empathy, and other traits that I don't think machines are actually ever going to have. And so we have to be conscious of designing for people, and it's going to require a new kind of design that really is not ubiquitous yet.
Human-centered.
Human-centered design, and a new way of human-centered design for these technologies if we want it to have more positive impact. Otherwise, you're going to run into more of these risks, which is what's leading to calls for legislation. Now, you're going to need it anyways, because there are still going to be bad actors, like that guy who scanned everyone's face off of Facebook. There are going to be people who don't have good ethics. And so that's really what laws are for. Education and processes are what for people who want to do the right thing are for.
Okay, so why don't we have a few minutes left. Why don't we close with your top 3 predictions? I'm kidding. What is but we are a WEF, right? And so everyone in the room is a leader. So when we go back on Monday to our offices, what is the one thing you think that we need to get it right to maximize the potential of the technology, as opposed to, if we don't do this, we're going to take, the wrong path there. So maybe we just rapid fire, because I don't think we have a lot of time, but what do you think is the one thing that you think, from the perspective of the organization and the sensitivity of the work that you guys are doing as well, right?
I think it's so disruptive that we need to focus on disrupting the core. I mean, it's incremental in some areas, it's definitely bringing productivity, but as an organization, we need to learn, and we need to learn fast, and it's better to start thinking how the core will change. And for us, it's basically the R&D.
Yeah, I think just appreciating the rate of change. Even if you look at kind of ChatGPT as a product that's just over a year old, how much that product has changed, and we haven't really messed with the interface. We, in fact, have explicitly not messed with the interface. Everything we've done is just been shipping basically everything that comes out of our lab into the product in a way that gives people a chance to use it and experience it. So. When you started, you could talk to a kind of not so powerful language-only model. Now you can talk to it, via your voice. You can take pictures of stuff. You can talk to a much more powerful language model. You can kind of customize it to specific tasks, and that's all just in a year. And imagine where we'll be in another year. And so I think just having that high rate of very frequent touch points with the technology and a very high rate of experimentation with it, and really just demanding that the people you work with are fluent in trying it and understanding where it can be applied, even if they're not actually applying it. Just going through and touching and feeling the technology is really, really important.
There's a lot of divides in the world. There's the digital divide, the AI divide, the compute divide. And I think institutions, both NGOs and big tech and others, are working to try to close those divides. But I think, and you kind of hit on this, James, a little more, is I think understanding the technologies, its risks, its limitations, its potential, AI literacy is fundamentally the key. It's knowledge is power. And the public cloud has democratized access to this technology. NVIDIA tries to put our stuff everywhere. OpenAI and others are wrapping amazingly usable interfaces on these very complex technologies. So I feel like the walls are coming down to gain access to them. But if you don't know they're there, or you don't know how to use them, or you don't even think you need to use them, then the AI literacy is going to be the big failure point. And most people won't lose their job to AI, and you said this very well. You'll lose your job to someone who uses AI. And that's something that can be addressed. That's an addressable problem.
I would say put this in the big picture and know this is going to be a 10 to 20 year build out of AI through society. Don't feel like, oh, if we don't implement all of this stuff next year, our business is gone. You know, there's obviously different companies that are on different spectrums of understanding this technology and how to use it. But again, I would say you have to, like Brad said, let your employees explore it because they're going to come up with ideas. And I'd say also do not be fearful of the doomerism of, you know, AI is going to launch the nuclear missiles, but instead be focused on there are real risks. You know, I would talk about the 3Ds, you know, disinformation, deep fakes, and discrimination and bias. Those are there in models today, and we have ways to think about it and deal with it. And we should focus on real harms, not science fiction harms that are not going to happen. They're just a distraction. So focus on what's real.
So we're in Switzerland, so we need to finish on time, even if I'm Italian, an Italian running as a host. But so thank you so much, guys. I think, you know, it was really, really enlightening and having you on stage. I think having this conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed, you know, in what you heard from the team. So thank you again, and pleasure having you.